The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Not like the ones on TV with grand ceilings and dramatic lighting. Just a regular room with fluorescent lights, scuffed floors, and uncomfortable wooden benches that made my back ache after 20 minutes. Judge Morrison sat behind his disc holder. Gray-haired, the kind of face that had seen everything and was tired of all of it. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table with their attorney, Gerald Hutchins, a man in an expensive suit who'd probably never lost a case he cared about. I sat alone at the defense table. No attorney. Couldn't afford one. Not after my parents had drained my accounts 3 years ago through a power of attorney I'd signed when I was 23, and stupid and trusting. Ms. Chun, Judge Morrison said, looking at me over his reading glasses, "You're representing yourself in this matter." "Yes, Your Honor," against experienced counsel. He said it like he was confirming I understood how badly I was about to lose. "Yes, Your Honor." He sighed. "Proceed with your opening statement then." I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I locked my knees and kept my voice steady. "Your Honor, 3 years ago my parents convinced me to sign a power of attorney. They said it was for emergencies. In case something happened to me. They took that document and used it to access my bank accounts, my investment accounts, and my trust fund from my grandmother." "That's an interesting narrative," Gerald Hutchins said, standing smoothly. "Unfortunately, it's also fiction. Miss Chun gave her parents access to those funds willingly. She was struggling with addiction at the time. Her parents were trying to protect her assets until she got clean." "I've never had an addiction," I said clearly. "That's what addicts say," my mother said from her seat. Her voice was soft, sad. The voice of a concerned parent dealing with a difficult child. Judge Morrison looked at me. "Do you have evidence to support your claims?" "I do." I opened my folder, pulled out bank statements showing the transfers. Account closures. The power of attorney document itself. These show the systematic withdrawal of funds over a 6-month period, all of it transferred to accounts in my parents' names. Gerald Hutchins took the documents. Barely glanced at them. "These show authorized transfers made by individuals with legal power of attorney. Nothing here indicates fraud or coercion." "Because I was coerced," I said. "My parents told me." "Hearsay," Gerald interrupted. "Do you have any witnesses to this alleged coercion? Any recorded conversations? Any documentation beyond your word against your parents?" I didn't. We both knew I didn't. Judge Morrison flipped through my evidence. His expression didn't change. "Ms. Chun, these bank statements show authorized transactions. The power of attorney was signed, notarized, and witnessed. Unless you can prove your parents acted outside the scope of that authority, or that you were mentally incompetent when you signed it, I don't see grounds for restitution." "They lied to me about what it was for," I said. "That's not illegal," Judge Morrison said. "Unethical, perhaps, but not illegal. People lie to each other all the time. Unless you can prove fraud in the inducement that they deliberately misrepresented the document's purpose with intent to steal, then this is a civil family matter, not a criminal one." My father leaned back in his chair, smiled slightly. The smile that said he'd already won. "Your Honor," I tried again. "They took everything. My grandmother left me that money for college, for my future. They spent it on a boat, on vacations, on renovations to their house. They didn't even pretend it was for my benefit. How they spent money they had legal access to isn't relevant," Gerald said. "The power of attorney gave them discretion over those funds. They exercised that discretion. End of story." "This is ridiculous," I said, and my voice cracked. "They stole from me." "Careful, Ms. Chun," Judge Morrison warned. "Those are serious accusations." "Do you have any real evidence? Anything beyond bank statements and your interpretation of events?" I looked at my folder, at the pathetic stack of papers I'd thought would be enough, at my parents sitting there so confident, so sure they'd gotten away with it. "Your evidence is amateur at best," Judge Morrison said, not unkindly. "Just stating fact. You're asking me to overturn a legally executed power of attorney based on hindsight and hurt feelings. That's not how this works." My father laughed, quiet, under his breath. But I heard it. That sound, that small, dismissive laugh cheered something in my memory, something I'd almost forgotten. I reached into my bag, the big one I'd brought because I couldn't decide what documents to bring. At T-bottom, wrapped in a gallon Ziploc bag, was a small leather journal, dark blue, worn at the edges. My mother's diary. I'd found it 2 months ago when I'd gone to their house to pick up some of my old things. It had fallen behind her nightstand. I'd grabbed it without thinking, stuffed it in my bag, and forgotten about it until last week when I was packing for court. Inside were entries from the last 5 years. Normal stuff mostly. Grocery lists, appointments, thoughts about friends and work and the weather, and other things. Things my mother had written and then apparently forgotten to destroy. Your Honor, I said quietly, I have one more piece of evidence. Judge Morrison looked at his watch. Make it quick. I opened the journal, found a page I'd marked with a sticky note. This is my mother's diary. Entry from 3 years ago, 2 weeks before they had me sign the power of attorney. I started reading. March 8th. David and I finalized the plan. We'll have Lily sign the POA under the pretense of estate planning. Once we have access, we'll transfer everything out in stages. 6 months, maybe 8. By the time she realizes, it'll be too late to challenge legally. David says no one wins these cases anyway. Families don't sue families. The courtroom went very quiet. That's private, my mother sighed, her voice sharp now. You stole that from my home? I found it when I was collecting my belongings. I said, belongings you told me I could come get whenever I wanted. Your Honor, this is... Gerald started. Let me see that, Judge Morrison said. I handed him the journal. He read the entry. Then the entries before and after it. His expression changed. Hardened. This appears to show premeditation, he said slowly. It's taken out of context, my father said quickly. That's just her processing her concerns about our daughter's financial stability. It's not a plan to defraud anyone. It literally says, finalized the plan. I pointed out. Figure of speech, Gerald said. You can't take every casual diary entry as a legal confession. Judge Morrison kept reading. Flipped to another page. There's another entry here. May 15th. Transferred $50,000 today. Lily still doesn't check her accounts. David bought the boat. I told him to wait, but he couldn't help himself. We need to be more careful. My father's face had lost some of its color. Another entry, Judge Morrison continued. July 2nd, almost done. Just the trust fund left. David wants to take it all at once, but I said that's too obvious. We'll do $20,000 a month until it's empty. By September, she won't have anything left to fight with, even if she notices. Your Honor, Gerald tried again. I'm not finished, Judge Morrison said, and there was steel in his voice now. September 9th. It's done. All of it transferred. Lily called today asking about her account access. I told her there was a banking error. She believed me. David thinks we should cut contact for a while. Let things cool down. I feel guilty, but we needed this money. Our retirement wasn't going to fund itself. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Mr. and Mrs. Chun, Judge Morrison said, looking at my parents like they were something he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. Would you like to explain these entries? They're misunderstood. My mother sighed, but her voice was shaking now. I was venting. I was upset. That's not what really happened. It reads like a very detailed confession, Judge Morrison said. Anyone can write anything in a diary, Gerald argued. This doesn't prove the entries are factual. They could be fiction. Fantasy. People write things in diaries that aren't true all the time. He was right. I could see it in Judge Morrison's face. The doubt creeping back in. Diaries weren't legal confessions. People did write fiction in them. This might be enough to create suspicion, but not enough to prove fraud beyond reasonable doubt. My father's shoulders relaxed slightly. He'd seen it too. I flipped to the back of the journal. To the section I'd found last night, the section that had kept me up until 3 a.m. Trying to understand what I was looking at, pages of numbers, codes, strings of letters and digits that made no sense to me, but that had made my stomach drop anyway because they looked official, important, secret, and at the top of one page, 2 words in my mother's handwriting. Autumn Sentinel. Your Honor, I said, there's something else in this diary, something I don't understand but that I think might be important. Judge Morrison looked tired again. Ms. Chun, please, I said, just look at these pages. I handed him the journal, open to the code section. He glanced at it, started to hand it back. Stopped. His face went very, very still. Where did you get this? He asked quietly. It was in my mother's diary. In the back section, I don't know what it means, but Mr. and Mrs. Chun, Judge Morrison said, his voice completely different now. Can you explain why your diary contains classified access codes and a discontinued operation name? I don't know what you're talking about, my mother said. But my father had gone pale, actual pale, like someone had drained all the blood from his face. Autumn Sentinel, Judge Morrison said clearly. That was a DoD operation, ended 12 years ago. The name is classified. The access codes in this journal are classified. How does a civilian have this information? I don't. My mother started. She worked for the Department of Defense, my father said suddenly. 20 years ago, she had clearance. That must be old notes. These codes are current, Judge Morrison said. Or they were as of 6 months ago, based on the date stamp notation here. Mrs. Chun, did you maintain security clearance after leaving DoD employment? No, my mother whispered. Then how do you have current classified access codes in your personal diary? No answer. Judge Morrison looked at me. Ms. Chun, I need you to step outside for a moment. What? Why? Because I need to make a phone call, and you don't have clearance to be in the room while I make it. Bailiff, please escort Ms. Chun to the hallway. No one else leaves this room. The bailiff, a large man who'd been standing so still I'd almost forgotten he was there, gestured to the door. I grabbed my bag and followed him out. The door closed behind us. Through the wood, I heard Judge Morrison's voice, muffled but urgent. I sat on the bench in the hallway. Waited. 15 minutes later, 2 men in dark suits appeared. They didn't acknowledge me, just knocked on the courtroom door, showed credentials to the bailiff, and went inside. 30 minutes after that, my parents came out flanked by the 2 men. My mother was crying. My father was staring straight ahead, his face blank. They didn't look at me as they passed. The bailiff gestured me back inside. Judge Morrison was still at his bench. The journal was gone. So was Gerald Hutchins. Ms. Chun, Judge Morrison said, I am going to ask you some questions and I need you to answer them honestly and completely. Okay, how long have you had that diary? About 2 months. I found it at their house when I was getting my things. Did you read the coded sections before today? Last night? I didn't understand them, but they looked important, so I brought the whole journal. Did you show this diary to anyone else? Copy any pages? Take any photographs? No. Just read it. I didn't know what it was. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then, your parents are in serious trouble. The kind of trouble that has nothing to do with your civil case. The kind that involves federal agencies and criminal charges. Because of the codes. Because your mother appears to have maintained access to classified information after her clearance expired. Because she appears to have stored that information insecurely. And because the operation name, Autumn Sentinel, is associated with counterintelligence work that, if compromised, could have significant national security implications. I stared at him. I just wanted my money back. I understand. And you'll get it. No. Just the diary, and my old yearbooks, and some clothes. The men who just took your parents there are going to want to talk to you. Interview you. They'll want to know everything about your parents' activities, their contacts, their travel. You'll cooperate with them fully. Understood? Yes, Your Honor. And Ms. Chu, he looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. I'm sorry your parents did this to you. Both the theft and whatever else they were involved in. You deserved better. Thank you. I whispered. The federal agents interviewed me for 6 hours, in a small room with a camera and a recorder, and 2 stone-faced people who asked the same questions 17 different ways. What did I know about my mother's work history? Nothing beyond that she'd worked for the government years ago. Had she ever mentioned classified information? No. Had unusual people visited their home? Not that I'd noticed. Had they traveled internationally? Sure, vacations. Normal tourist stuff. Had I ever seen the diary before? No. Why did I take it? It fell behind the nightstand. I grabbed it, without thinking. I was upset and just taking anything that was mine or that they wouldn't miss. When did I read the classified section? Last night. I'd been looking for more evidence of the theft and had flipped through the whole thing. Oper and oper, the same questions, looking for inconsistencies. Finally, the woman agenthood introduced herself as Special Agent Martini sat back. Ms. Chun, your parents are going to be charged with multiple federal crimes. Unauthorized retention of classified information, possible espion, possibly other charges, depending on what we find. Do you understand what that means? They're going to prison. Very likely, yes. For a long time. You're going to be contacted by a lot of people. Media, other family members, people who want information or want you to speak on your parents' behalf. My advice: don't get a lawyer. Not for criminal charges, you haven't done anything wrong. But get someone who can help you navigate what's coming. I can't afford a lawyer. You will soon, Special Agent Martinez said. Your parents' assets are frozen, but once the criminal case is resolved, restitution will be paid to victims. You'll get your money back. Plus, there's going to be interest in your story. Book deals, media, appearances. I'm not saying do any of that. I'm just saying you'll have options. She slid a card across the table. My number. If you remember anything else, if anyone approaches you with questions about your parents, if you feel unsafe, call me immediately. Okay. And Ms. Chun, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I've been doing this for 12 years. I've seen a lot of parents do terrible things to their kids, but using your daughter to steal money while also compromising national security, that's a new low. The story broke 3 days later. Local news first. Local couple charged in classified information breach, 10 national, then international, when it turned out my mother had maintained contact with a foreign intelligence officer she'd met 20 years ago, and had been providing him with updates from classified files she'd somehow continued accessing through old credentials that should have been revoked. My phone exploded. Journalists, distant relatives, people from high school I hadn't talked to in 15 years suddenly very concerned about my well-being. I ignored all of them, stayed in my apartment, watched my parents' faces on the news, and tried to reconcile them with the people who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and tucked me in at night. A lawyer contacted me. Pro bono, said she specialized in victim restitution cases and wanted to help me recover my assets. Your parents are going to plead guilty, she explained over the phone. The evidence is overwhelming. As part of their plea deal, they'll be required to pay restitution to all victims. You're first on that list. You'll get your $267,000 back, plus interest, plus damages, probably close to $300,000 total. How long will that take? 6 months, maybe. Once they liquidate assets, they'll lose everything: the house, the boat, their retirement accounts. All of it goes to restitution first. Then to pay their legal fees and fines, they'll have nothing left. No, they won't. That's how this works. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated. Instead, I just felt empty. My mother wrote me from jail, a letter that came 2 months after her arrest. No return address, just the detention center stamp. Lilies. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand, but I need you to know the truth, even if it doesn't change anything. Your father and I were in debt. Serious debt. The kind that means losing everything. Bankruptcy. Maybe worse. Primera. Panicked. I remembered that I still had access to some old DoD systems. They never revoked my credentials when I left. I thought maybe I could sell something. Just once. Just enough to get us out of the hole. But once you start, you can't stop. Take one more, eh? They threaten to expose you. They promise just one more piece of information and then you're done. It's never done. The money we took from you wasn't for boats and vacations. It was to pay off the people we owed, the people who would have hurt us if we didn't pay. We didn't want to take from you. We had no choice. I know that doesn't make it right. I know we should have told you. Asked for help. Done literally anything else. But we were scared and desperate and we made terrible choices. Your father is taking the plea deal. 20 years. I'm taking mine too. 15 years. By the time we get out, you'll be in your 50s. We'll have missed everything. Your wedding, if you get married. Your kids, if you have them. Your life. I'm sorry. For all of it. For stealing from you. For lying. For being the kind of mother who would put her own survival above her daughter's future. You deserved better. I don't expect you to write back. I don't expect to hear from you again. But I needed you to know. I'm sorry. Mom, I read the letter 3 times. Tried to find anger. Found only sadness. They'd been desperate. Scared. They'd made choices terrible. Choices, but they'd made them from fear, not malice. It didn't excuse anything. It didn't make the theft okay, or the lies forgivable, or the betrayal any less painful. But it made them human. Flawed, broken, desperate humans who'd failed spectacularly at protecting their family and themselves. I folded the letter. Put it in a drawer. Didn't respond. 6 months after the courtroom, I received a check for $312,847. My original $267,000 plus interest, damages, and court fees paid by my parents' liquidated assets. I stared at it for a long time, tried to feel victorious. Felt only tired. I deposited the check. Paid off my debts. Put the rest in savings. Started looking at houses. A reporter called. Said she was writing a book about my parents' case. Asked if I wanted to contribute my side of the story. No, I said. There could be money in it. A lot of money. People are fascinated by stories like this: family betrayal, espionage, courtroom drama. You could tell your story on your terms instead of letting others define it. I'm not interested in money from this. But they took from you. You could take something back. Turn their betrayal into your success. That's not success, I said. That's just more taking. More using other people's pain for profit. I'm done with that. I hung up. Blocked the number. A year after the courtroom, I bought a house. 3 bedrooms. A backyard. Space for a garden I'd never planted but liked knowing I could. I filled it with furniture I picked out myself. Hung pictures I liked. Painted the walls colors my mother would have hated. I didn't visit my parents in prison. Didn't take their calls when they tried. Didn't respond to letters. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have that conversation. But that day wasn't coming anytime soon. And Lisa, my mother's sister, reached out 6 months after the conviction. Asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost said no. Agreed anyway, because I was curious. We met at a cafe downtown. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. I didn't know, she said immediately. About any of it. The theft, the espionage, none of us knew. Your mother kept everything hidden. Okay, I'm not asking you to forgive them. I'm not asking you to visit or write or anything. I just wanted you to know that some of us understand why you're not, why you can't. Thank you. And I wanted to apologize. For my part, I should have noticed something was wrong. Should have paid more attention. Should have asked more questions. But I didn't. I just accepted the surface story and moved on. That was wrong. You didn't know what to look for, I said. Maybe? But I could have looked harder. We sat in silence for a moment. Are you okay? She asked. Really okay? I'm getting there, I said. I have a house. I have savings. I have a life that's finally mine. It's not perfect, but it's mine. That's good, Aunt Lisa said. You deserve that. You deserved it all along. 2 years after the courtroom, I was in my garden, the one I'd finally planted, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? Ms. Chun, this is Special Agent Martinez. We spoke 2 years ago about your parents' case. I remember. I wanted to let you know your mother is very sick. Cancer. Stage 4. She's being treated, but the prognosis isn't good. Her attorney petitioned for compassionate release. It was granted. She'll be out in 2 weeks. My stomach dropped. Why are you telling me this? Because she asked me to. She wanted you to know. She doesn't expect you to contact her or visit. She just wanted you to be aware. In case you heard it from someone else first. In case you wanted to make a choice about how to handle it. What about my father? Still serving his sentence. He'll be eligible for parole in 18 years. I sat down in the grass. Stared at my tomato plants. Thank you for calling. Ms. Chun, what your mother did was unforgivable. I'm not suggesting you owe her anything, but I've seen a lot of people in this situation. Some visit, some don't. There's no right answer, just whatever you can live with. I understand. After we hung up, I sat in my garden for an hour, thought about hospitals and deathbeds and final conversations. Thought about anger and betrayal and the complicated mess of loving people who'd hurt you. Thought about the woman who'd taught me to read and had stolen my future in the same lifetime. I didn't know what I'd do. Didn't know if I'd visit or call or write or just let her die without ever seeing her again. But I had time to decide. Time to figure out what I could live with. Time to choose my own path instead of having it chosen for me by other people's expectations or guilt or obligation. For the first time in my life, I had choices. Real ones. Made from strength instead of desperation. And whatever I decided, it would be enough. Because it would be mine.